Hey guys, what's up? It's Aurelius, and today we're going to be talking about, well, I was going to talk about the next preview video after the Is Evil Rational one, but I actually am not really a big fan of rank control, and this video seemed, I disagreed with parts of it, but the disagreements were small enough that it was like, whatever. Um, I, yeah, so let's just move on. So, why, PragerU, why be happy now? We're going to find out.
Most people think of happiness as essentially a selfish issue. I want to be happy, and I want to be happy for me.
Okay.
I'd like to suggest that, in fact, happiness is far, far more than a selfish desire. In fact, it is a moral obligation.
Okay, interesting. So, the former statement, I agree that happiness is more than a selfish desire because, your happiness can help other people and feeling good and whatever and stuff like that. It can help other people. It can lift up other people in your life. It can get you into the place where you can, help the people that you care about and stuff like that and whatever. So it's more than just like being selfish. Taking care of yourself is not only good for you, it's good for others. We are social beings and we are interconnected and blah, 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 right? Moral obligation, that's interesting. Let's see where this goes. Yeah.
I know that most people have never thought of happiness in this way. Neither did I, to tell the truth, for much of my life. I thought that happiness, and especially the pursuit of happiness, was all about oneself. But it isn't. Whether or not you're happy, and most importantly, whether or not you act happy, is about altruism, not selfishness, because it is about how we affect others' lives. And that's what makes it a moral issue. Ask anybody who was raised by an unhappy parent whether or not happiness is a moral issue, and I assure you the answer will be yes.
Or they might just look at you funny because it's a really strange way to phrase it, but whatever.
It is no fun being raised by an unhappy parent, or being married to an unhappy person, or being the parent of an unhappy child, or working with an
Sound effects.
unhappy coworker.
Okay, but what does unhappy mean? Does unhappy mean depressed? Does unhappy mean melancholic? Does unhappy mean angry? Does unhappy mean mean? Does unhappy, what is it, what does it mean? What do you mean by that? Right? Is like if like this, and I know it might be like, well, it means unhappy, lol, but that's not actually a satisfactory thing for like what he's talking about here. Do you mean someone who's like just kind of a gloomy person, or do you mean someone who's like going through some stuff? Like, what do you mean? Anyway, let's see.
Our happiness affects others profoundly.
Okay, how? Directly, as in your brain, you're in your brain, you're like, I'm happy, that will affect, I mean, no. What affects others is our actions and the way that we act in the world, right? Now, our happiness influences that, and I guess that's the argument that's being made here. However, it's not, it's complicated, right? It's definitely not as direct a link as he's trying to say here, but let's go.
That's why happiness is a moral obligation. We are morally obligated to at least act as happy as possible, even if we don't feel happy. People can't be guided by feelings because it is how we act that affects others, not how we feel. A good analogy to bad moods is bad breath. Why do we brush our teeth multiple times every day? It's not only because of hygiene, it's because we want to present good.
Damn, that guy's got some stinky ass breath. Man, I think it's a little worse than just not brushing his teeth. He should go to the doctor if it's that bad. Oh my god.
Breath to anybody who we come into contact with. Well, the same thing holds true for our moods.
By the way, this guy's Prager right now is anti-mask and anti-vaccine and other stuff like that. So I mean, clearly his care about other people and his obligation to other people and having to be whatever to other people, it clearly only extends so far. But whatever. Hey, sometimes things don't age so well. But anyway,
bad mood should be regarded exactly as we regard bad breath. Why are you inflicting it on me, or why am I inflicting it on you?
okay, well, sure, in terms of like, just because you feel bad, that's not an excuse to act terribly towards other people. But again, there's very strange implications here because it's kind of guilt tripping people for feeling bad or feeling sad or stuff like that, which is not the right approach. Is a rather toxic, as the thing would be, approach. But yeah.
It's just not right. That's why one should endeavor as much as possible to act as happy as possible, as often as possible. And just about anyone can do this. No matter how unhappy you may feel at any given moment, you can and have to make a decision on how to act. We may not be free to control whether we feel sad or happy, but we are free to control whether or not we present a happy countenance to others.
No, well, okay, yes, we are free to, I guess, but the no I disagree with is that why? Okay, you are allowed to, I mean, you're not allowed to act bad, act like bad towards other people or whatever, just because like you feel bad or whatever, you know. But you also, like, I don't understand. So like, what if you just see someone who's upset about something that's gonna like ruin your life or whatever? What's wrong with you? What are you talking about? You know, like, I mean, you're differentiating between like presenting, like you're acting like this. He's acting like this presentation of a good mood, like just like a fake smile and blah 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 blah, like somehow affects other people. But no, that's kind of strange. Like, okay, I'll give you an example. So someone, if I'm talking to someone and they're just kind of, just kind of like a bit bummed out, I can just kind of tell or whatever. That's like, oh well, I mean, that sucks, right? But as long as they're just, they're just talking to me normally and whatever, but clearly they're just, just kind of a bit upset about something. It's like, okay, whatever. I like to think that I'm a pretty well-adjusted person, so I'm not irrationally upset by other people being like what? Maybe I'd even ask, like, oh, is something up or whatever, But, like, now obviously if that person, they're upset and then like I say something to them and then they're like, no, stop, yeah, I don't care, blah, 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 and they're like, well, that's unacceptable. That's not okay, right? But the mere act of someone clearly just kind of not being in a great mood, that doesn't mean that they're acting badly. That's such a bizarre, weird thing to say. So yeah.
That doesn't mean we don't share how we feel with our best friends, including hopefully our spouse. Of course we can, and without overdoing it, we should. I'm really sad. I had this problem at work today. I have this problem with my marriage. I have this problem with my kid. I have this problem with my parents. But you don't inflict a bad mood on anybody.
Again, what is meant by this? Merely seeming like you're in a bad mood, or actually inflicting, like, being shitty to other people? There's a big difference there. Merely being upset around other people is not a bad thing in and of itself, right? At all. You're just kind of more honestly expressing how you feel, And if you bottle up completely in some way and act completely fake and or whatever all the time, that can be really weird and lead to really weird outcomes. So this is a really strange, he's framing this in an incredibly strange way where he's taking something that is true, which is that, hey, just because you feel bad and whatever, you shouldn't act shitty towards people. Like, you shouldn't, and it's not really an excuse to, and that's a bad thing to internalize and get whatever. And that's true, whatever. Like, yeah. Just because I'm upset in general, it doesn't mean that if I go to the store and the person gives me the wrong amount of change or whatever. Well, I mean, if you still use cash, I don't know as much these days, but then it's not just because I'm pissed off about something. It's not okay for me to go what the hell, man? How dare you? Okay, sure, right? But the mere act of clearly just being in a bad mood that's not a bad thing. It's just so weird. It's so strange. It's guilt tripping people for feeling upset about anything. It's really weird.
That's a different thing altogether. We all have the capacity to control how we express ourselves, no matter how we feel. I can prove it. Imagine someone who is just acting miserably to his or her spouse when somebody comes to the door. Have you ever noticed how nicely such a person will treat the stranger? How are they able in a split second to go from inflicting their awful mood on their spouse to acting beautifully toward the stranger who's at the door. Obviously, we can control our moods. Or how about this? Let's say you are chronically in a bad mood and I offered you $10,000 a week not to be in a bad mood. Do you think this would affect your ability to be in a good mood? I suspect so.
It really depends on the person. If you just kind of have something kind of messed up with your brain, and I don't mean that in a derisive way, that means that you just kind of have lower levels of dopamine and serotonin or whatever. It kind of wouldn't. If you're experiencing postpartum depression, as just an example, that's not the same as like permanent levels of lowered thing. You literally physically are not capable of being happy all the time, whatever. You're not. You would be incapable of it. You will feel like so like there is a physical element to a lot of this, like in terms of like, you know, our brain is a very complicated organ, but an organ nonetheless, and has things like that influence it. So it really depends what we're talking about. If you know, so it might influence or whatever, but you know, it depends on the situation.
And to be honest, we even have the power to affect how we feel, not only how we act.
Okay, depends what we were talking about again.
Abraham Lincoln famously said that we are as happy as we decide to be.
Well, that was Cope on Lincoln's part, since he famously was a pretty melancholic person or whatever.
That is exactly what we should decide. Being happier is good for us, and it is what we owe everybody who is in our lives. Becoming happier is another great benefit of acting happy. The happier we act, the happier we will feel.
This can be true, as in like there might be a point where like you're down or whatever, and you know you want to, and you start like doing things even though you don't really feel like it, and maybe you'll, you know, get into that. Or it's like commonly to deal with like anxious, like anxiety stuff. A lot of what you can do is that if you're feeling anxious about something, even if you can't really stop the anxiety, but you can try to move with it and kind of like keep it with you. But you know, try to keep going about things and not let it restrain you. And then you know, hopefully you can it'll just kind of, it'll wax and wane, and you can kind of live with it, right? And it'll affect you less and less, is kind of how a lot of stuff with like broadly, I'm not a therapist, something, I'm not whatever, but broadly that's how a lot of stuff for like, because I have some experience there, like with dealing with anxious stuff goes, right? There's some times where you do have to kind of like fake it till you make it or whatever, right? But internalizing this as a general attitude towards how you should deal with your emotions that's really messed up, actually. Like that is a lot of problems there, because what this will naturally lead to is just not addressing anything, because you're like, oh, I just gotta act happy, I can control how I feel, but you can't always, or at least not without, you know, taking a deeper look there or doing a lot of other stuff there sometimes, depending on the situation. But yeah.
We think that our actions are determined by our feelings, but we have the power to achieve the opposite, to shape our feelings by our actions. How we act influences our feelings more than our feelings should ever be allowed to influence our behavior. So yes, indeed, we do have a moral obligation to be, or at least to act, happy. The happy make the world better, and the unhappy make it worse.
What if you're happy with just like, I don't know, being like a terrible person or something? Like, wait, what do you? I mean, you know, that's not an inherent thing at all. Like, yeah, I guess you'd like to think that people who generally are more well adjusted and, you know, whatever, are going to be predisposed to making better and more moral decisions. I guess, depending on how you define moral, it's kind of, but like. Oh God, no! What? There's so many issues with that. Yeah, no, you're making it this. It's not a moral obligation that way. You have a moral obligation, I guess, to not act. You know, like to not like act terribly towards others or do bad things to other people and whatever. The I guess I meant is if we're talking about inherent moral obligation, and that's like a whole different discussion. But like, I would say that, yeah, you probably have an obligation, to not be shitty towards other people. It's a pretty easy call for me, you know. But that doesn't necessitate that you don't ever act like you are currently upset or act like you are currently not feeling the greatest or whatever. Like, that's bizarre. In fact, I would kind of feel shitty if someone like felt the need to act like all the time, like I'm perfectly happy, ha ha ha, fake grinning, just it's kind of weird. It's kind of really deeply weird and like inhuman, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to go around just throwing, like someone just says hi to you and then you're like, I'm gonna tell you about my entire, I'm just gonna lay it all out there, lord dump all my stuff. But it doesn't mean that you also have to be like, like, oh, I'm perfectly fine, nothing wrong here, ha ha ha, because it just leads to you bottling everything up. It's just really odd. But anyway,
Happiness is a huge issue. Lincoln was right. We are as happy as we decide to be. And it's time to make that decision.
the other key point here, and why, of course, a video like this is on PragerU, is that it reframes all issues like this as just kind of personal problems. Oh, you're upset? Oh, well, you know what? That's just because you're choosing not to be happy, okay? Screw you. You're just choosing not to be happy, and you're making everything worse. It's your fault. It's placing everything entirely on the feet of some kind of personal, you can take this and then, like, remake your life or whatever, right? And it's like, well, not always at all. And there can be other things that make you unhappy or whatever. Like, I mean, it's just it's a really, really strange and crappy way to frame mental health stuff. And he has multiple videos like this on the channel. Anyway, well, I'm interested in, hold on, let's finish the video.
I'm Dennis Prager.
I'm Dennis Prager.
Join Prager University. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for free at prageru.com.
Wow. Anyway, well, let's see the comments. As a former cashier, I 100% agree. I want to leave my customers in a good mood. It's just selfish to inflict your sorrows and those who can do nothing about it. Well, I mean, sure. I guess. Okay, yeah, okay, here. Well, this one's more interesting. So many idiots, totally missing the point. Maybe I'm one of these idiots. He's not telling you to put on a happy mask and suppress your feelings for the sake of others. He quite literally is, but whatever. But rather, he's saying that you should be aware of how the way you present your mood or feelings affects your relationships. No, that is not what he said. What he said is that you can change how you feel, and that, given that that is true, you have a moral obligation to feel happy, right? Or at least to act like you feel happy all the time or whatever. That's what he said. Those are pretty much his words. So, yeah. Like, obviously this is true, but then it's completely ignoring the other weird, guilt-trippy stuff that he packages in there. Like, yeah, if you had the worst day of your life, don't take it out on a grocery store cashier. Sure, great. But that's not even what he's talking about. What he's talking about is, no, the mere existence of you being happy is what you have to, keep, Like, it's just a really strange way to frame it. But man, these people seem to love it. Love these videos. Just found today and I'm binge watching. This is the first one that I disagree with. True. Only partly, but still. Something should have been mentioned in the video. I've been dealing with depression for about 5 years, and though mostly I'm in a good mood and know how to deal with myself and the world, there are times where I'd sooner die than pretend to be happy because depression is killing me. It doesn't happen often. It's very summarized in a short YouTube comment and much more complex than it's stated here, but it's worth mentioning that it's not always possible to act happy. Though I know it's not meant that way, it felt like a small attack on me personally because I can't always achieve it. No, it is meant that way. It is meant as an attack on you because these people are ghouls and, don't care at all about, like, anything like that. And, in fact, usually view stuff like mental illness and whatever as defects or faking it or blah, 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 because, they hate any method of challenging yourself, any method of introspection, any method of looking at stuff. Like, it's just like, yeah, I don't know. This video is really annoying. What a dumb video. But yeah, so in summary, no, you shouldn't go around with a weird happy mask on all the time. It's a really bizarre thing to do. Obviously, don't inflict your negative emotions or whatever on others in some arbitrary way if they didn't do anything wrong or anything like that. Like that's obviously true, and that's unfair to other people, right? But at the same time, no, you shouldn't bottle everything up and always act happy because like magically this is going to make headers feel better. And you also definitely don't have a moral obligation to do that at the time. You have a moral obligation to treat others well and treat others as you would like to be treated. But that's about it. Okay, when it comes to that, you don't have a moral obligation to be happy. You don't have a moral obligation to make others happy through projecting some happiness or whatever. A really odd, weird video, but interesting, and it gives you an insight into the way that like conservative ideology approaches stuff like this and packages, as I've said before, self-help sounding stuff into really weird, reframings of discussions. But yeah, so that was a preview. Why be happy? And I was really, if you enjoyed that, like and subscribe and whatever. And see you later. Have a good one. Bye bye.